Well, unless the game doesn't require multiple inputs at the same time. So like Osu Standard, maybe even Taiko since you're alternating a lot. A keypad would actually make a lot more sense here. Players like to have their setup at a specific angle, or to use certain key arrangements. Having a whole separate device makes a lot more sense for this purpose. But once we start talking about Mania, and even just 4-key, having that horizontal space that comes with the keyboard really allows for comfortable key bindings. Getting into 10+ key, and a lot of these keypad devices start getting rolled out entirely. Now before we get into the keyboard at hand, I want to reiterate some things I've mentioned in a previous video that will basically encapsulate the frustration I was dealing with this entire month. I was talking about how there weren't really any keypads dedicated to Mania, even for 4-key players, whereas with Standard, there's so many options. Even keyboard manufacturers barely market their polling rates or ability to hit simultaneous inputs. And what's usually emphasized is what switch it is, or how the RGB works. And that kinda makes sense. The main thing that matters for the average gamer is if the keyboard has in-key rollover, so that none of your inputs are blocked. Even for the average Mania player, they probably won't even notice anything about the polling rate, as they wouldn't be able to take advantage of 1000 Hz anyways. So we're really a niche audience that won't exactly have keyboards marketed towards us, and of the 3 keyboards that I've tested and returned this month, they were all less to be desired. I can't even pinpoint the exact problems here. SpeedLink had some weird delay compared to when I was actually tapping. The Apex 7 couldn't hit chords consistently as I was expecting, and the Keychron C3 Pro just felt inconsistent all over. But again, all of these keyboards excelled in every other aspect, as that really matters to the casual PC user, especially the Keychron. That one felt the most smooth to type on, so it was a little disappointing having to return each of these, all because I couldn't hit chords within a 1 millisecond margin. And this is where we are now. I think the best way to summarize this keyboard is by going over all the good stuff, all the bad stuff, and everything in between. Alright, for those of you confused about how this program works, it basically records the amount of time in milliseconds between each key press. So if I wait for about a second or two, this number will be in the thousands. 1000 milliseconds is 1 second. And everything after that should ideally be 0. whatever. Due to system lag or human error when it comes to hitting chords, these numbers won't be smaller than that, but this does mean that they're all within a 1 millisecond margin of each other. So basically at the same time. As we saw with the Apex 7, I kept getting 1 or 2 milliseconds between some chord presses. This directly leads to the chord splitting that you see in the offset plot. With the Magic Force, absolutely not. Like I said, it's super consistent down to the millisecond, so whatever ability you have will be reflected in the keyboard exactly as it should. Going for those top near 1 million scores, or even just casually practicing Hard Rock in Mania, it makes all the difference. I kinda had a funny thought. What if accuracy wasn't even that hard? Or like way more people are good at it than we initially thought, but it's just that their own hardware doesn't allow them to reflect their skills within their score. Maybe this isn't exactly true, but I do think this is applicable to a lot of players, especially those playing on a laptop keyboard, so having proper hardware like this would make a big difference for them. I'm going to show some more accuracy gameplay here, and again, it just feels so responsive. It feels like any mistakes that I made within the score are because of me and not because of the keyboard decided to respond a few milliseconds later. It may sound kind of extra talking down to the milliseconds like this, but you have to remember, the Hard Rock window is about 11 milliseconds. I even set my Eterna window to 11 as well. So when you have 22 milliseconds to work with for hitting the maximum judgment, having these subtle inconsistencies of 1 to 2 milliseconds means that you're potentially reducing your score of about 10% from what it could be, and that's happening throughout the whole chart. This argument is also brought up with the monitors and mice. People often say the human eye can't see 240 frames in 1 second, or you're not going to be doing 1000 inputs in 1 second. That's not exactly what it's about. It's more about responsiveness and how close your real-time inputs directly translate into the game or what you see on the screen. And there's clearly diminishing returns with all of this. But at this point, 1000 Hz with no chord splitting should be the standard for every gaming keyboard by now. So is there any concerns with this board? Well, as I mentioned back then, there seems to be a lot of concerns about the quality and how you can get dropped inputs rather quickly within use of this board. I think I know what's going on here. Keyson offers 2 variants of the Magic Force 68, one with Aotemu switches and one with Gatoron switches. I had the Aotemu blue switch variant, and it literally died the first day of playing charts. I kept switching keybinds and switches were going out left and right. So maybe if a lot of people were buying this board because it's the cheaper option, and then reporting that the Magic Force in general had quality issues, then that would explain it. I can't really tell though, because most of the complaints don't mention which version they had, and the RG board spreadsheet lists the price as $55, which is in between the 2 versions, so it's really hard to tell. It does list the Gatoron switches, but again, I really don't know. In the Eterna server, there's been a lot of confirmations that Aotemu switches are notoriously bad, so there is information there. With the Gatoron versions that I bought, they lasted a really long time, and eventually I decided to solder on new switches, and even got a longer lifespan with them. Even the Aotemu switchboard worked perfectly once I soldered on some different switches. So to me, the board quality seems fine. I've had 3 of these keyboards over the span of 6 years, and none of them went out due to some quality issues. It all came down to the switches themselves, which are in a way separate from the keyboard. This is the 4th one that I have. I can't really say much about the durability just yet, as it's only been a few days, but I'll keep an eye on that. So yeah, if you do plan on buying this board, just be aware of the difference. You can go for the cheaper option if you are experienced with soldering, but I don't know, the $20 difference might not be worth all the work of desoldering and resoldering, all for you to make a mistake and burn out a socket entirely. I can't guarantee anything about the quality, as there still might be some actual concerns with the board itself, but from my experience, I haven't had issues across 3 keyboards. The Gate-A-Round version has LEDs in them, and that's nice if you play in a low-lit environment. The keycaps are fine, you'll probably just get used to them, or you can replace them. I think there's a slight difference in feel between the black and white colors. This is a 68 keyboard, so you do lose out on the function row, but you keep the full arrow keys. This didn't bother me in the past, but now that I think about it, the main advantage of a TKL layout is that it allows for more mouse space, but that's in the horizontal direction. So freeing space in the vertical doesn't really give the same advantage, and it just makes it feel clunky trying to input specific function commands. I also wish this board was a bit heavier. I have a weird angle on my table, so things are more prone to sliding around easily. And the case design is fine. I think I prefer case designs that come over the top or have some sort of board around the edge, but the floating key design is fine enough to get used to. That's all there really is to say about this board. It's just a simple keyboard with or without LEDs, no software, no screen, no RGB, none of the excessive gamery features, a unique layout that isn't done much, and just really exceptional at registering inputs down to the millisecond. Some concerns about quality, but that depends on some factors. If a keyboard manufacturer decides to have these type of specs, in addition to all the pretty colors and decent build materials, it would end up being the best keyboard, period. But what we're left with is a sort of dice roll RNG of a board, but when it works well. If anyone knows of a different keyboard that can produce these kind of chord results consistently, as well as being more reputable for quality, let me know in the comments. But for now, I'll be enjoying these results while I can. The Apex 7 couldn't quite hit chords at the